Chapter 231. Saber Emperor Convening Order. Boom. Just as Xiao Chen was deep in thought, a resplendent firework went off in the dark sky of Lingyun mountain range. The dazzling firework reached a height of 10,000 meters in the blink of an eye. The firework discharged and turned into the image of the founding ancestor, the Saber Emperor. It condensed in the night sky, then it scattered in the next moment, turning into thousands of light motes that looked like meteors, flying in all directions. Some of the meteor-like light motes flew about 1,000 meters, landing. Some did not scatter even after they flew several 10,000 meters. In an instant, the signal spread throughout the great Qin nation. Saber Emperor Convening Order. Xiao Chen said in shock and stopped thinking as he watched the dissipating firework in the sky. This was the Heavenly Saber Pavilion's second-ranked convening order. It was only second to the Heavenly Saber Convening Order issued when the sect was at risk of being destroyed. The range of the Saber Emperor Convening Order covered the entire Great Qin nation. All disciples wearing the Heavenly Saber Pavilion identity token, regardless of wherever they were or if they were in the middle of training, would receive the signal and rush back as soon as they could. In the past 1,000 years, the Heavenly Saber Pavilion only used the Saber Emperor Convening Order twice. Even during the demonic calamity 20 years ago, the Heavenly Saber Pavilion did not issue any convening orders. What exactly happened for the Heavenly Saber Pavilion to issue a Saber Emperor Convening Order? Countless people within the Great Qin nation were all pondering the same question as Xiao Chen. Early the next morning, Lu Sufeng and Xiao Chen rode the Green Bird heading to the Heaven Viewing Platform's drill grounds for the exam. This time, Lu Sufeng did not go the wrong way. They managed to reach the drill grounds within an hour. Originally, they thought they were early enough. Who knew the other 18 inner disciples who passed the second stage already gathered in the drill grounds and had been waiting for a while. Not just that, the spectator stands were already completely full as well. With a glance, one saw dense groups of people everywhere. A rough count gave a minimum of 3,000 or 4,000 people. Most of the Heavenly Saber Pavilion inner disciples were here. Aside from the inner disciples, there was also a big group of core disciples and true inheritors. They were all seated in a dedicated pavilion above. The atmosphere was overly grand. Xiao Chen was confused. He turned and asked Lu Sufeng in a soft voice, "What's going on? Why are there so many people today? This is more than double of the previous time." Lu Sufeng replied in a similarly soft voice, "Did you see the Saber Emperor Convening Order last night?" Xiao Chen nodded. "I saw it. However, what does the Saber Emperor Convening Order have to do with today's exam?" The Saber Emperor Convening Order was indeed a big event. To put it in perspective, the Heavenly Saber Pavilion was one of the top sects in the Great Qin nation. It was considered a big deal in the Great Qin nation when they used the Saber Emperor Convening Order. However, what did it have to do with the core disciple exam? The foundational stages were completed ahead of time and today's exam only consisted of the arena battles. In Xiao Chen's opinion, there would be no problems obtaining the first place from these 19 people. Although he enjoyed himself in the fight with Zhong Lai and Mu Heng, Xiao Chen had not taken out all he had yet. In single combat, he was confident of ending the fight in 10 moves. With the result pretty much decided for the arena battles, there would logically be no one interested in watching. However, not only did the audience not lessen, but there were also significantly more people than 3 days ago. Lu Sufeng suddenly realized something. "That's right, you have been training the past 3 days. So, you have no idea what went on outside. You will understand after I tell you about it." The second day after the exam ended, the Heaven Viewing Platform issued a notice in advance. The main hall will recall all core disciples training outside. Today, they will have a ranking battle to choose the strongest 90 core disciples. So, we are not the main attraction today. What is going on for them to recall all the core disciples back? Xiao Chen wondered, feeling suspicious. However, he was not worried. It was impossible for everyone to rush back within one night. In every major city within the Great Qin Nation, there were relay stations that had flights directed to the Heaven Saber Pavilion. As long as they spent a considerable number of spirit stones, they would be able to rush back to the Heavenly Saber Pavilion within half a day. What Xiao Chen could not figure out was why the core disciple exam place was on the same day as the core disciple ranking battles. Xiao Chen asked, did the notice mention why they were selecting the top 90 core disciples? Lu Sufeng shook his head and said, it did not mention it. They probably have a very big mission. Otherwise, they would not use the Saber Emperor convening order to summon them back so urgently. Anyone who does not rush back within a day of receiving the convening order will be punished heavily. While they were speaking, many black dots appeared in the sky above the drill grounds. As the black dot drew nearer, the crowd discovered these black dots to be many ferocious flying spirit beasts. The spirit beasts quickly descended and circled about 100 meters above. Then, cultivators jumped off them and landed heavily on the ground without injuries. After they landed, these people headed for the pavilion prepared specially for core disciples. The core disciples who did not leave the Heavenly Saber Pavilion for training were already waiting there. That is the 18th ranked on the Wind Cloud list, Qianduan Peaks Lin Yun. He cultivates the purely flame-attributed True Sun art. His saber techniques is incomparably tyrannical. After not seeing him for half a year, his strength seems to have increased again. He is not a peak superior grade martial saint. The ranked 10 Jade Maiden peaks Yun Kashin. I wonder how far she has cultivated her gentle musical art. The ranked 2nd Tianyu peaks Yi Lingfeng is here as well. He has not been back for more than a year. He is now a medial grade martial saint. I wonder if the first ranked Murong Chong will come. He was already a peak inferior grade martial saint last year. I wonder how much stronger he has become. After this, there were even more people jumping off spirit beasts. The crowd immediately recognized these people. They were all core disciples occupying the top 100 spots. Every time one of them showed up, there would be exclamations of admiration. The 20 people on the drill grounds were all focused on this group of people. Xiao Chen took a casual glance and discovered this group to be very strong. Their auras were all incomparably robust. Most of these people were inferior grade martial saints. Some of them had already reached the peak of inferior grade martial saint. It seemed like the top 90 core disciples would be chosen from the top 100 people on the Wind Cloud list. The people in the top 10 ranks have such strength. How strong is the first ranked person? Xiao Chen thought to himself. Hu Kai. Suddenly, a sonic boom came from the sky. A black dot drew nearer in the sky. Its speed was close to the speed of sound. As it moved through the air, the friction between it and the air gave off sonic booms, reverberating in the drill grounds. Bang! As the mentioned person was about 1,000 meters away, an intense sonic boom reverberated in the air after he had already landed on the ground. This person wore lunar white long robes. His features were exquisite. He was holding a saber in his right hand, and his aura withdrawn. He had a certain charm to him as he walked slowly toward the pavilion. It's Murong Chong. Murong Chong really came back. This is a flying martial technique. I can no longer make out his strength anymore. The crowd on the spectator stands all started crying out. A significant number of young female disciples were blushing red. Their eyes were gleaming, and their hearts were beating wildly. When Xiao Chen saw this person, his calm face could not help but reveal a grave expression. Although the top 10 disciples Xiao Chen saw earlier were strong, if they fought, Xiao Chen was confident of a 50% chance of defeating them. If Xiao Chen put in everything he had, even if it were the second Yi Lingfeng, he was confident he had a 60% chance of winning. Only this person gave him an undefeatable feeling. From the younger generation of disciples, Xiao Chen had only felt such a feeling from one person, the Lu Ruyu he first met. Could it be that this person was comparable to the Lu Ruyu I met initially? However, he was definitely not a match for the current Lu Ruyu. Lu Ruyu was now very close to being a martial king. She was just short of a step of reaching the realm that every young cultivator yearned for. She was undefeatable within the same cultivation realm. Although Xiao Chen was unable to see through this person's cultivation, based on his aura, he could guess his cultivation to be superior grade martial saint, and there was still a distance to reaching the peak. Marong Chong. Which peak is he from? Why have I not heard anyone mention it? Xiao Chen asked curiously. When Lu Sufeng heard this, he had a clearly uncomfortable expression. He said, he is a free man, he does not belong to any peak. When Xiao Chen saw Lu Sufeng's expression, he could tell that Lu Sufeng had things he did not want to say. He asked, free man. What does that mean? After entering the Heavenly Saber Pavilion inner sect, the first thing anyone would do was select a peak. Only then would they make their identity token and become a true inner disciple. How could there be someone not belonging to any peak? If he did not belong to any peak, then what was he doing in the Heavenly Saber Pavilion? Could it be for the dense spiritual energy in Lingyun mountain range? Is there someone who was that strange? Since he could enter the inner sect, naturally he should value the high-ranked martial techniques and cultivation techniques in the peaks. The dense spiritual energy environment should be secondary. Lu Sufeng paused for a while, as though he was making a decision. Then, he sighed and said, in truth, Marong Chong was a disciple of our Qingyan Peak. Wang Rong, who we met in the library, also used to be a Qingyan Peak disciple. Marong Chong and my sis are fellow disciples. They grew up together. 2 years ago, he left in a huff after he failed to court my sis. Xiao Chen was somewhat surprised. He did not expect there to be such a story behind this. He could not help but cast a few more glances at Marong Chong, who was already making his way up the pavilion. Only after all the core disciples arrived, the chief examiner slowly revealed himself on the drill grounds. He looked at Xiao Chen and the rest before saying, each of you will undergo 15 fights. A victory in each fight will earn you 1 point. A defeat gains no points. The person with the highest score at the end will be crowned first in this core disciple exam. He will be rewarded with 1,000 inferior grade spirit stones and an inferior grade earth-ranked spirit weapon. The remaining 9 positions have the same reward, 500 inferior grade spirit stones and a superior grade profound ranked spirit weapon. At the same time, the ranking of the top 10 in the ranking hall will be increased by 100 places. The rewards were indeed more than 5 times the previous years. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen did not care about them. Regardless of spirit weapon or inferior grade spirit stones, he did not have too much need of them. The thing he needed now was a rank 6 and above body tempering pill or a natural treasure that could temper his physical body. Beyond that, he needed highly ranked cultivation techniques that specialized in training the physical body. The arena for the competition was in the center of the drill grounds. There was basically nothing exciting. Most people who had Xiao Chen as their opponent chose to give up. Out of 15 fights, Xiao Chen obtained a victory by default for 13 of them. Only Mu Heng and Zhang Lai chose to continue fighting. Unfortunately, they were unable to do anything to Xiao Chen when working together 3 days ago. In single combat, Xiao Chen only had to use 60% of his strength, and he was able to end the fight within 50 moves. In the 15 fights, Xiao Chen achieved a complete victory. There was no doubt who was number 1. As for second place, it had to be decided between Mu Heng and Zhang Lai. Their strength was about the same. After fighting for a long time, they had not determined a victor. In the end, Mu Heng relied on the advantages of his physical body and won a battle of attrition, defeating Zhang Lai and obtaining the second place. All the fights ended around noon. The core disciples for this year were finally chosen. Lu Sufeng narrowly obtained the 10th place. His wish was finally granted. Go and rest first. After the ranking battles of the core disciples are completed, you will have one final battle with the last 10 core disciples, the chief examiner reminded everyone. Originally, Xiao Chen was thinking of leaving immediately after receiving the reward. When he heard the chief examiner's words, he stopped. This was not too bad, either. It would be good to see how strong the 10 top core disciples on the wind cloud list were. The chief examiner arranged for seats in the spectator stands for Xiao Chen and the other newly appointed core disciples, separating them from the inner disciples. After that, 500 core disciples came out. The mood of the crowd now completely ignited. It was similar to the atmosphere of the ranking war at the end of the year. However, in truth, if looked at from another angle, these sudden fights could be seen as the end of year ranking war. The top 100 core disciples were basically the top 100 disciples in the Heavenly Saber Pavilion. The only difference from this and the end of year ranking war was a significant reduction of people taking part. The quality of the competitors was high. Thus, it was of a pretty intense level. Yi Chen, I feel that, with your strength, if you took part in this core disciple ranking battle, you would be able to place within the top 10. Mu Heng, who was beside, suddenly commented. Zhang Lai was somewhat dissatisfied. He said, "You must be joking. The cultivation of the top 10 or at least at the peak of inferior grade martial saint. Martial Grand Master to Martial Saint is the first big hurdle of all cultivators. Even if one was just a thread's width away, the difference in strength is like heaven and earth. They are able to exteriorize their essence to attack. Furthermore, their attacking force is multiple times stronger. There was indeed a huge difference between a martial Grand Master and Martial Saint. Zhang Lai was not wrong. If a peak superior grade martial master defeated an inferior grade martial Grand Master, or even a medial grade martial Grand Master, it would not be too surprising. However, if a peak superior grade martial Grand Master wanted to defeat a recently advanced inferior grade martial saint, it would be very difficult. Although there were precedents in the Tianyu continent, these were geniuses seen only once in 100 years. If not, they had an innate bloodline with an inherited martial spirit or their cultivation technique was significantly stronger than their opponents. Only then could they achieve such a result. With Xiao Chen's strength, Zhang Lai was of the opinion he could still defeat an ordinary inferior grade martial saint. However, the weakest of the top 10 core disciples was at least a peak inferior grade martial saint. Furthermore, they all had experienced hundreds of fights before they managed to make their way to the top 10. They were simply a class higher than the common martial saints below the mountains. Simply their cultivation technique was much stronger than an ordinary martial saint. Xiao Chen was indifferent to their discussions. There was no point in talking about it. The only way to convince someone was to actually fight. There would eventually be a fight to prove this. Mu Heng looked at Zhang Lai and said, "Don't feel unconvinced. 3 days ago, when we were working together, we were only able to make Yi Chen use 60% of his strength. If he fought without holding back, he would be comparable to a medial grade martial saint. Only 60% of his strength." Zhang Lai was in disbelief. Combined with Mu Heng, they were already comparable to an ordinary medial grade martial saint. If Xiao Chen was able to fight them using only 60% of his strength, did that mean an ordinary medial grade martial saint would not be his match? That is impossible. Yi Chen is only a peak superior grade martial grade master. How could he even compete on equal grounds? Zhang Lai shook his head, deciding not to pursue this question any further. There were 10 arenas in the drill grounds. The rules of the competition were the same as earlier, to accumulate points. The top 90 core disciples would be decided from the number of points. The strength of the core disciples could not be underestimated. Most of them had a set of trump cards of their own. Furthermore, as someone who used a saber as well, Xiao Chen did not find it boring to watch match after match. He could consider this as expanding his horizons as well. However, even though it was fantastic, there were no highlights. Watching endlessly under the hot sun bored people somewhat. The Jade Maiden Peak's Yun Kashin is coming out. She is within the top 10 on the Wind Cloud list. Her Heavenly Melody Saber technique cannot be defended. I wonder who her opponent is. She is going against the ranked 18th Yan Feng. He is ruthless, but he should not be a match for Yun Kashin. After watching for so long, someone from the top 10 finally comes out. I was starting to feel bored. Same for me as well. If it were not for these top 10 rankers, I would not have come today. The somewhat dull spectator stands immediately turned fervent when Yun Kashin came out. One could hear plenty of discussions about the upcoming fight. Xiao Chen looked at the girl who slowly made her way up the arena. Yun Kashin was dressed in white. She was not considered very beautiful but still had a pleasant appearance. She looked plain, simple, and natural. She is a peak inferior grade martial saint. Her cultivation is the lowest amongst the top 10. The Heavenly Melody Saber technique should have something special about it. Otherwise, she should not be able to make it into the top 10, Xiao Chen analyzed in his heart. Suddenly, Xiao Chen remembered something. He turned to Lu Sufeng beside him and asked, "Why do I not see Chu Xinyan? She is a core disciple, as well, right?" When Chu Xinyan was mentioned, a smile immediately appeared on Lu Sufeng's face. He explained, Xinyan's core disciple status is obtained as a result of her alchemist status. Most of the Jade Maiden Peak disciples are like that. They obtained their core disciple status through other means. There are very few who rely on their combat prowess to become a core disciples like Yun Kashin. So, that was the situation. The Heavenly Saber Pavilion is quite reasonable. Alchemists contribute heavily to a sect. They could even be considered rare resources. You seem to be very familiar with the Jade Maiden Peak disciples. How many moves do you think Yun Kashin will take to defeat her opponent? Xiao Chen smiled gently. Lu Sufeng laughed awkwardly and said, Yun Kashin spends most of her time training outside. The sect missions she takes are all in distant places. I have only exchanged a couple of words with her before. While they were speaking, Yun Kashin and Yan Feng had already walked onto the arena. Under the instruction of the referee, they each stood in their spot. The crowd also stopped their idle chats. Senior Sister Yun, my apologies. After they bowed, Yan Feng said something out of courtesy before drawing his saber. Several saber chi appeared instantly and broke through the still air, flying at Yun Kashin. Yun Kashin was not an regular opponent. Hence, Yan Feng did not hold back the moment they started. He sent out several saber chi with all his might. He sent them flying at various angles. He even launched himself forward. There was a flash of white light and Yun Kashin flew far back, as if she were as light as a feather. Her body was so soft, it was like she did not have bones. She easily dodged all the incoming saber chi. Yan Feng smiled lightly as he appeared where Yun Kashin landed. I have predicted you would land here. This is my true killing move. Space-breaking cross chop. Yan Feng flicked his wrist and a cross-shaped, crisscrossing saber chi flew through the air rapidly. Cracks appeared everywhere the cross-shaped attack passed, showing the might of this move. This attack was very accurate. It hit exactly where Yun Kashin landed at the right time. She wanted to change her direction in midair, but it was incredibly difficult. Even if she managed to dodge, she would be placed in a passively defending position. However, Yun Kashin had an incredibly calm expression. She suddenly dropped vertically, like a leaf falling to the ground suddenly turning into a block of iron. It was incredibly strange. Who? Relying in the suddenly increase in falling speed, the instant Yun Kashin landed, she pushed her feet off the ground before the cross-shaped saber chi hit. She immediately moved several tens of meters, easily dodging Yan Feng's attack. Great movement techniques. Moving like a swallow in one instant, as light as a feather, and then landing heavily, as heavy as a mountain. Furthermore, she is able to change between the two states very familiarly. When Xiao Chen saw this scene, he could not help but praise her. Lu Sufeng said, "This is one of the Heavenly Saber Pavilion's rare earth rank movement technique, Thundercloud art. Only true inheritors or people with exceptional talent have the right to practice it. However, in order to be accomplished in it, it requires extremely high comprehension abilities." When Yan Feng saw Yun Kashin dodged his meticulously planned move, he revealed a look of mild disappointment. He shouted and his body left behind a long flash in the air, hacking at Yun Kashin with his saber. Dang! This time, Yun Kashin did not choose to dodge. She did not even draw her saber from the scabbard, using it directly to swept upward. When the saber struck it, it gave off a melodious ringing. Yun Kashin blocked it without being pushed back. Yan Feng revealed a livid expression as he saw that Yun Kashin did not even draw her saber. He said, "Senior Sister Yun, after not seeing you for at least half a year, am I not even qualified to make you draw your saber?" Yun Kashin said unhurriedly, "Don't get distracted. If this were a life or death battle, you would be dead already." Yun Kexin's indifferent attitude completely angered Yan Feng. He shouted and held his saber with two hands. A 2-meter-long saber light lit up the blade, forcing Yun Kashin back incessantly. Kai! Kai! Yun Kashin was not able to withstand the pressure of the huge force. After a while, her body was pushed to the edge of the arena. If she fell off, she would lose this round. Are you still not drawing your saber? In that case, fall off. Yan Feng shouted and he raised his aura to its peak instantly. He immediately knocked Yun Kashin flying back. Like before, Yun Kexin's expression was not panicked. She grasped the hilt of her saber with her right hand and slowly drew her saber slightly. Wang! A piercing sonic boom extending from the arena to the entire drill grounds. Under the influence of the sonic boom, the crowd in the spectator stands all felt their eardrums being shaken, and making them dizzy. Xiao Chen was astonished. What a terrifying sonic boom. Even though I was more than 1,000 meters away from the arena, the effect was still so strong. Yan Feng, who was in the center of the sonic boom, was struck instantly and deafened. The blood and qi in his body were surging. He could not help but vomit a big mouthful of blood. Boom! Yun Kexin's right hand moved and the blade that was slightly drawn out was sheathed again. The sound waves that scattered everywhere appeared as a ripple and formed a huge whirlpool. Then, they went back into the saber. The instant the saber blade was completely sheathed, the sound waves which were all gathered exploded out. They gave off a louder and clearer sound than before. Even though the sound was louder and clearer this time, the inner disciples in the spectator stands did not feel anything. This was because the sound waves had condensed into a line and they all struck Yan Feng's body. Yan Feng was bleeding from all his pores. His face was frighteningly pale. He fell to one knee with a "Pu Tong" as he watched the white-clothed Yun Kashin float down. Yan Feng smiled bitterly. "Yun Kashin. It was a simple half-year and I truly am not qualified to make you draw your saber. Could it be that the next time we meet, I would not be even qualified for you to use your scabbard?" Yun Kexin's white clothes fluttered. There was no change in her expression. She said, "As a bladesman, it is not important whether the saber is drawn or not. Don't pay too much attention to the superficial things. Otherwise, it will be difficult to comprehend your own saber intent. Yun Kashin is victorious this round. The referee on the arena called out. As Yan Feng watched Yun Kexin's back, he felt an agonizing pain in his heart. It was not long time ago when he was still on equal grounds with her. Now, he was only able to chase after her. The Heavenly Melody Saber technique is indeed horrifying. Yun Kashin actually only used half a move to defeat Yan Feng. She is just like how she was in the past, always astonishing people. Yan Feng also lost unjustly. He was too focused on his opponent not drawing her saber. He still had some trump cards he had not used yet. This is the result of his mental state being weak. After all, Yun Kashin was once ranked lower than him on the Wind Cloud list. Now that she is above him, he felt it was unacceptable. You can't really say that. The mental state of a cultivator is more important than any cultivation techniques or martial techniques. It is one of the things that makes up a cultivator's strength. Although this round was short, the crowd felt that it was not gratifying enough, they wanted it to continue. However, it had not affected the quality of the competition. The discussions of the crowd never stopped. Zhang Lai looked at the distant Yun Kashin. A strange look appeared in his eyes as he muttered, "This girl is not simple. Her Heavenly Melody Saber technique is almost at great perfection." When Xiao Chen heard this, he silently agreed. A martial technique consisted of different parts: the circulation path of essence in the body, the physical movement of the body, and the state of mind that was contained in the martial technique. For example, the state of the rushing thunder saber technique was the state of thunder. As for the Lingyun saber technique, there were two states, the state of mountains and the state of clouds. Only by merging all three components could one reach great perfection. However, the comprehension of a state required comprehension ability and patience. It was incredibly difficult to comprehend a state of mind. If one focused on chasing after such a state, there might not be any progress, and instead one might even atrophy. Thus, most cultivators would not chase after these mental states before reaching a certain level. For Yun Kashin to be able to come close to comprehending the Heavenly Melody Saber technique state, almost pushing it to great perfection, proved this girl's comprehension abilities, talent, and fortunate encounters were all things that were out of reach of a normal person. Zhang Lai glanced at Mu Heng, then Xiao Chen. He smiled and said, "Now, do you think Yi Chen can make it into the top 10 core disciples? Not to mention the gap in cultivation realm, anyone who is able to get into the top 10 is a 1 in 10,000 genius. In the talent-filled Heavenly Saber Pavilion, it is impossible to enter without true skill." Mu Heng muttered to himself for a while before seriously saying, "Yun Kashin is strong, really strong. However, she is still not a match for Xiao Chen." Xiao Chen glanced at Mu Heng in surprise. He did not know where Mu Heng got his confidence from. Even though he did not fear Yun Kashin, after watching the earlier match, he did not have the absolute confidence to defeat her. Stop saying such big words. Yun Kashin is able to defeat the ranked 16th Yan Feng with half a move. She still has plenty of trump cards to play. How do you know she is not a match for Yi Chen? Based on cultivation realm, Yi Chen is only a peak superior grade martial grade master. In terms of comprehension of state, Yun Kexin's Heavenly Melody Saber technique is almost at great perfection. It is not any weaker than Xiao Chen's Lingyun Saber technique. There is no way to differentiate who is stronger or weaker. This time, before Zhang Lai could say anything, the other new core disciples voiced out their objections. Furthermore, their words were backed by facts, there was no way to dispute them. Mu Heng smiled faintly, "Talk is nothing. In the future, you will naturally know whether I spoke the truth." Lu Sufeng leaned over to Xiao Chen and asked in a soft voice, "Yi Chen, if you really went against Yun Kashin, how confident would you be of victory?" Xiao Chen thought for a while before saying, probably about 50%. If her true strength is only at this level, then 60%. When Lu Sufeng heard this, he was incomparably astonished. He was very familiar with Xiao Chen's character. He would never brag. If he said 50%, it could only be higher and not lower. 50% was the minimum. As the competition on the arena carried on, the top 10 core disciples of the Wind Cloud list all came out one after another. The crowd was indeed not disappointed at their strength. The ranked 5th Li Yuz only used 3 moves to deal with the ranked 15th Lian Yun. His speed is extraordinarily fast. The ranked 4th Yun Feimo. He defeated his ranked 20th opponent with 1 saber strike. It seems his cultivation technique has reached the 10th layer. The ranked 8th Leng Aoshuang only used 3 moves to deal with his opponent. As Zhang Lai said, the top 10 core disciples were all not weak. They were significantly stronger than the other disciples. They all basically dealt with their opponents within 5 moves. Up to now, aside from the ranked 1st Murong Chong, the other 9 of the top 10 core disciples already fought and shown how strong they were. Xiao Chen had also noticed something. He did not know if the Elders' Assembly did it on purpose or not, but the top 10 core disciples did not meet each other in battle. There were no fierce battles between the giants. In Xiao Chen's opinion, the top 10 core disciples were already significantly stronger than the rest. There was no possibility for the others to obtain victory. Their opponents could only be one other. It is Murong Chong's turn. His opponent is the ranked 11th Yan Chuo. In the previous year, he was also one of the top 10 disciples. All the opponents he had were not able to last more than 10 moves. Yan Chuo's strength is decent. However, he ran into Murong Chong. His defeat is certain, it is just a matter of how long he can last. I have not seen Murong Chong make a move for a long time, how exciting. Last year, Murong Chong only appeared for a short period of time. He rarely shows up in the Heavenly Saber Pavilion. This is a bladesman who spends all this time training. If it were not for the Saber Emperor convening order, he would definitely not return. Yan Chuo heard all the discussions from the crowd. His expression changed, he was not feeling good. He looked at the blue-clothed, somewhat proud Murong Chong. Regardless of what the others said, I only have one purpose standing here. It is not to see how many moves can I withstand, but to defeat you. Murong Chong laughed coldly. Before you speak, you should check your strength. Both of you, bow. Stand upright. Begin. Who? After the referee spoke, there was a cool breeze on the arena. There was a melodious trill. This was the sound of a saber being drawn from its scabbard. Yan Chuo's chest tightened. He did not expect Murong Chong would ignore his status and make the first move. He panicked slightly, but it was fortunate he had a strong mental state. After a moment, he calmed himself down and prepared to deal with Murong Chong's attack. However, when Yan Chuo looked before him, he could not find Murong Chong. He looked around in a circle, but aside from the countless cool breezes, he could not find anything. Where is he? This time, Yan Chuo completely panicked. How did a person disappear right under my nose? This is too strange. Do not panic, he can't possibly have left the arena. Since he made the first move, he will definitely reveal a killing intent. As long as I can grasp the direction of the killing intent, I can block his attack. Yan Chuo kept repeating this to himself over and over again. He extended out his perception and he moved around without stopping. He did not dare to let down his guard. Pu Si. Suddenly a long wound appeared on Yan Chuo's chest, blood spurted out. His eyes were open wide, he had an incredulous expression on his face. How did I get wounded? Kai. Kai. Suddenly the cool breeze in the arena stopped. The air in the arena became still. Murong Chong's handsome face appeared before Yan Chuo, revealing a cruel smile. Murong Chong's eyes were filled with a boundless murderous intent. Suddenly, he launched himself over like a gushing river. Scram! Murong Chong withdrew his saber and kicked Yan Chuo in the chest, kicking him off the arena. How could I not feel such surging killing intent? What was going on? He flopped on the ground a few times. He could not understand what happened despite thinking about it so hard. When the referee saw this, he immediately announced, Murong Chong. Victory. Yan Chuo was pale. When he recovered his wits, he shouted, "That's not possible. How did I lose? I still have not used the trump card I've been training for a year. Murong Chong, do you dare to face me properly? Do you dare or not?" Murong Chong did not even bother looking at Yan Chuo on the ground. He said coldly, "Idiot, you have to be able to use your killing move for it to even count. You are not even able to use it, yet you are not embarrassed to cry out like that." Xiao Chen was deep in thought as he looked at Murong Chong's back. What a horrifying clear wind chop. Originally, I thought my great perfection clear wind chop was sufficient for a killing move. Now, it seems like it is far from sufficient. Wang Qinian, the true inheritor of Wanren Peak, looked at Lin Feng's matches from up on the pavilion. He frowned slightly and said, "What is Lin Feng doing? He lost 9 matches out of 15. Is he doing this on purpose?" Luo Qidi also felt it was strange when he heard this. His opponents were mostly ranked above the hundreds. With his strength, he should have been able to defeat them easily. Wang Qinian said, "When you go down later, ask him what's going on. Tell him to do his best to obtain a spot in the top 90. I have a feeling that this mission will be very beneficial for us. After it is completed, we should be able to raise our strength to another level." The battles on the arena continued. The top 10 rankers on the wind cloud list were now far ahead of the people behind them. They were now on a completely different level. As the sun was setting, the battles on the arena reached the final rounds. The top 10 rankers still had not met each other in battle. It could now be confirmed that this was the arrangement of the Elders' Assembly. However, given that these 10 people had the same number of points, how would they be ranked? The top 10 rankers are indeed extraordinary. They are much stronger than I imagined, Zhang Lai sighed as he muttered to himself irresolutely. Mu Heng did not say anything when he noticed that Zhang Lai was still stuck on the issue from before. The strength of the top 10 had indeed exceeded his expectations. However, he believed Xiao Chen had the strength to be amongst them. There was no reason for this belief, it was just his intuition. Suddenly, Lu Sufeng whispered, "Did you notice? That Wanren Peak's quick saber Lin Feng lost 10 rounds in a row. What is he doing? Was there such a thing?" Xiao Chen had not noticed at all. However, regardless of what Lin Feng was thinking, he would not be able to cause any problems. Perhaps if it was the past, Xiao Chen might need to utilize some tricks to obtain a swift victory. However, after he used the flowing light flower and increased his comprehension abilities, there had been a qualitative leap in his strength compared to after he came back from the spirit mines. Xiao Chen said indifferently, "Just ignore him. If he wishes to challenge me, I will give him an unexpected surprise." When the afterglow of the setting sun dyed the west horizon completely red, the battles on the drill grounds were all completed. The top 10 core disciple rankers had obtained victory in all their 15 fights and were tied in the first position. At the end, everyone felt somewhat regretful. After all, the fights everyone wanted to watch were evenly matched fights of high levels. The chief examiner gestured and Xiao Chen and the other new core disciples slowly walked to the center of the drill ground. It was time for them to accept the challenges of the last 10 ranked core disciples. Although the level of this fight was not high, it was somewhat worth watching as well. The people who were fighting to protect their status as core disciples would do everything they could in battle with all their strength. Although Xiao Chen and the others would not lose their status as core disciples if they lost, they would lose the rewards they had obtained earlier according to the rules. The purpose of this was to prevent them from giving up and cheating. Such rules guaranteed that both sides would fight with all their might without holding back. Otherwise, they would suffer huge losses. Strange, why is Wanren Peak's Lin Feng up there? He is the second strongest core disciple of Wanren Peak. Even if he is not ranked in the top 90, he should not be amongst the bottom 10. You can't figure out something so obvious. You are too stupid. The bottom 10 core disciples can choose their opponent. He is definitely dissatisfied after being defeated by Yi Chen last time. He must be here to take revenge. That is interesting. Lin Feng is already an inferior grade martial saint. His speed is somewhat famous in the entire Heavenly Saber Pavilion. His strength should be similar to Yi Chen's. And that should be so. I heard that during their last fight, Yi Chen won because of a trick, and so Lin Feng was not convinced of his loss. Otherwise, he would not have given up on his matches and dropped his rank by more than 300 positions. The crowd was all surprised by Lin Feng's appearance. However, when they thought of the reasons behind it, they were not overly astonished. After all, every cultivator had their pride. The new core disciples lined up several meters away from the bottom 10 core disciples, who also stood in a line. Lin Feng placed his hand on the saber hilt. His black eyes revealed a murderous intent as he stared at Xiao Chen. He had withdrawn his aura, storing up strength. If looks could kill, Xiao Chen would have died 100 times over already. The chief examiner glanced at both sides. Then he pointed at the people on his right and said, "If you lose this time, you will lose your status as core disciples. I hope you will make full use of this chance and put in your all. Now, from the left to right, come out one by one and choose your opponent." The first person of the left, Zhang Yu, revealed a somewhat joyful expression when he heard this. Being able to pick his opponent first gave him an advantage that did not need to be explained. Contrary to that, the expressions of the three people on the right became significantly more unsightly. One could imagine which opponents would be left for them. It would definitely be the three people no one wanted to face: Mu Heng, Zhang Lai, and Xiao Chen. Zhang Yu immediately stepped forward and pointed at Lu Sufeng. "I choose him to be my opponent." This person had pretty good insight. Lu Sufeng was indeed the weakest of the 10 of them. However, Xiao Chen did not think that Lu Sufeng would lose for sure. His chances of winning were about 50%. Do not hold anything back, the opponent is likely to come at you with full force from the start. When Xiao Chen walked past Lu Sufeng, he whispered to him. Lu Sufeng nodded gently. He was the first to be pointed out by the opponents. This made him look bad. Everyone here had some pride. They would not want to be belittled in front of everyone. Zhang Yu was only a superior grade martial grand master. He was comparable to Lu Sufeng. He did not have any advantages in terms of cultivation realm, but he had a richer combat experience. It was indeed as Xiao Chen had expected. Zhang Yu executed his strongest move as soon as he stepped up, intending to catch Lu Sufeng unprepared. However, Lu Sufeng was ready and met that move with equal force without suffering a disadvantage. Their cultivation realms were about equivalent. No one had any clear advantages. In the end, it was a matter of who had the stronger mental state. Whoever could maintain their calm for longer and not reveal a weak point would be the one to obtain the final victory. After the two of them exchanged more than 200 moves, there was still no clear victor emerging. Zhang Yu slowly started to get anxious. The pressure on him was much stronger than the one on Lu Sufeng. Zhang Yu's moves started to turn fiercer the longer this dragged on. Lu Sufeng had a tranquil look in his eyes and his heart was as calm as still water. Lu Sufeng continued to block Zhang Yu's torrent of attacks and eventually found a weak point. Lu Sufeng immediately executed the secret technique of Qingyan Peak, profound wind chop. He knocked Zhang Yu out of the arena and obtained victory. The chief examiner walked over to Zhang Yu and removed the gold identity token that hung on his waist. That token represented his core disciple status, but it was removed despite Zhang Yu's dissatisfied expression. Continue on. Next. The fights continued on. The remaining core disciples learned from Zhang Yu's mistakes and they all became more cautious. The fights were quite even, with both sides having victories and losses. I choose him. When it was Lin Feng's turn to choose an opponent, he pointed directly at Xiao Chen after he stepped into the arena. Xiao Chen was not surprised. He leapt up gently and landed firmly in the arena. When Xiao Chen got in the arena, the anger displayed in Lin Feng's eyes calmed down instead. He gathered his strength and raised his strength. He was storing up his power without releasing it. If I cannot defeat you in 5 moves, I will admit defeat. Lin Feng enunciated this word by word as he looked at Xiao Chen's indifferent expression. Xiao Chen found this funny. He said placidly, "Would defeating me in 5 moves give you a sense of accomplishment? Since you have made so many preparations and dropped yourself to the bottom 10 to fight with me, I shall give you this chance. Fight." The moment the referee spoke, the aura that Lin Feng had been suppressing completely exploded out. The aura of an inferior grade martial saint surged toward Xiao Chen. Stormy Gale. After the previous lesson, Lin Feng did not give his opponent the chance to make the first move. After he released his aura, he immediately executed the martial technique he was proud of. He struck out with his saber and 6.6 meter long saber chi flew out repeatedly. They flew toward Xiao Chen in a torrential manner, like a stormy gale. A strong wind blew on the arena. One could even faintly hear the sound of a torrential rain. Xiao Chen had underestimated this person slightly. The state of wind and state of rain in this saber have been comprehended by Lin Feng to small perfection. The horrifying saber chi had the speed of the wind and the density of rain. Wind and rain worked together. As the rain fell, it borrowed the might of wind to move even faster. The frantic saber chi did not leave Xiao Chen with any time to think, they arrived before him instantly. Before the saber chi got near, the wind from the saber caused Xiao Chen's clothes and hair to flutter about. When the wind struck his face, it stung mildly. Dang! Xiao Chen did not dare to be careless. He drew the snow-white lunar shadow saber and released a surging saber light, shattering the first saber chi. Saber chi was the biggest difference between a martial saint and a martial grand master. A martial grand master could only condense saber light. However, a martial saint could initiate a ranged attack after a saber light was condensed. In regard to quality and quantity of essence, Xiao Chen and Lin Feng were not far apart. In fact, the quality of Xiao Chen's essence was slightly stronger. However, saber light and saber chi differed by a grade. To deal with a saber chi condensed with 50% of his opponent's strength, Xiao Chen had to use 60% of his strength. Even so, Xiao Chen's rate of essence recovery was much faster than his opponent's. Hence, he did not care about the exhaustion speed of his essence. He smiled gently and executed the Azure Dragon Cloud Soaring art. His figure flickered around the arena and left behind afterimages. It was difficult to differentiate the real from the fakes and his true body could not be found. Saber chi after saber chi were smashed apart by Xiao Chen and scattered in all directions. Although Lin Feng knew this move would not deal any significant damage to Xiao Chen, he had not expected Xiao Chen to break it so easily. Swallowing cloud drinking rain. Lin Feng shouted and the wind and rain suddenly stopped. The remained saber chi returned to Lin Feng's body with a shua sound. Xiao Chen reappeared and looked at Lin Feng leaping over. He said softly, 4 more moves. Cut the crap. This move will settle you. Lin Feng said ferociously as blue veins popped on his forehead. Right after he spoke, Lin Feng's saber was already above Xiao Chen's head. Xiao Chen did not dare to be careless. The whirlpool in his dantian span faster. 6 drops of pure essence dripped out and instantly turned into a torrent of surging essence that flowed along the meridians in his arms into the saber blade. Pa! 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 A bright light exploded out of the snow-white lunar shadow saber, condensing into a resplendent saber light. Boom! The instant the two weapons met, an intense whirlwind appeared with the saber in Lin Feng's hand as the center. It had swallowed the howling wind and torrential rain from earlier and gushed out with an even more violent aura. Ti-da! Ti-da! The sound of a torrential rain started to sound beside Xiao Chen's ear. Every time a drop of rain was heard, the energy in Lin Feng's saber increased. Toward the end, the sound of rain became more intense. There were gray clouds covering the sky. It had actually started raining for real. Furthermore, the energy in Lin Feng's saber had risen to a horrifying level. Xiao Chen had some difficulty blocking the energy from the saber, and his body could not resist moving backward. The torrential rain soon made Xiao Chen's clothes and hair wet. Lin Feng revealed a pleased expression. "You are very fortunate. You are my first opponent since my torrential rain saber technique reached great perfection. I even gave up on the top 90 spots." The might of this move, swallowing cloud drinking rain, can grow infinitely without limits. The longer you defend against it, the stronger the pressure on you will be. In the end, your injuries will only be more severe. I advise you to admit your defeat early. Xiao Chen moved back slowly in the howling wind and torrential rain. His expression did not change when he heard Lin Feng's words. Instead, he revealed a faint smile. "Grow infinitely without limit. I said I will give you the chance to execute 5 moves. As before, I will not attack you for this move. Unless it was a great perfection mysterious phenomenon, no one else would dare to claim their strength could grow infinitely without limit. Even a great perfection mysterious phenomenon could be broken through with force. To be able to manifest such a realistic mysterious phenomenon, Lin Feng's move was very shocking. However, to Xiao Chen, it was full of holes. It would be easy to break it. However, Xiao Chen did not intend to do so. Xiao Chen placed his left hand on the saber hilt, changing the way he gripped the saber into a two-handed grip. He immediately stopped moving backward and shouted, "Self-appreciating lonely mountain." The illusion of a 1,000-meter-tall mountain appeared behind Xiao Chen. The summit was shrouded in clouds and pierced through the layer of dark clouds in the sky. After that, it poured into Xiao Chen's body. Bang! The instant the mountain entered Xiao Chen's body, a majestic aura poured out from within. Xiao Chen stood up straight on the arena, as though he were a majestic mountain. "The winds may howl, the rain may torrent against me, but I will still not move. Infinite growth without limit. Screw that. I shall not fear, I shall simply stand here and admire myself." This move was the strongest defensive move in the Lingyun saber technique. When it was executed, Lin Feng felt a huge pressure. No matter how much the strength increased, he was not able to move Xiao Chen. In his eyes, it was like his saber had hacked a majestic mountain. There was no effect at all. Retreat. Lin Feng withdrew his saber and retreated backward urgently. The mysterious phenomenon in the air disappeared instantly. The swallowing cloud drinking rain could indeed grow without limit. However, it would still require sufficient essence to support it. Covering the entire arena with the mysterious phenomenon was already the limit of Lin Feng's abilities. If he maintained it for a long time, he could lost as a result of essence exhaustion without Xiao Chen having to do anything. Xiao Chen smiled lightly and dissipated the energy from the self-appreciating lonely mountain. He looked at the retreating Lin Feng and said, "There are 3 more moves, let's see what kind of ability you have." Lin Feng saw that Xiao Chen's expression was that of having all this planned, to play with him in the palm of his hands. He shouted angrily and his qi and blood surged. Lin Feng did not bother to use any martial technique and simply rushed at Xiao Chen. Su. Quick saber Lin Feng. Even though he did not use any martial technique, his speed became even faster. A strand of saber qi flashed by before Xiao Chen, causing him to be mildly surprised. In the time it took for a spark to fly, Xiao Chen moved his body back. 2 strands of hair on his forehead were chopped off. He had narrowly dodged this saber strike. 2 more moves. Xiao Chen pushed his feet off the ground and retreated backward by more than 100 meters, increasing the distance between him and Lin Feng. Xiao Chen's words were like a demon plaguing Lin Feng. It made him feel very frustrated. He felt extremely helpless and uncoordinated, and he had no idea how to attack Xiao Chen. Wanren Peak's Wang Qinian revealed a disappointed look as he looked at Lin Feng on the arena. He turned to Luo Qidi, who was beside him, and said, "Let's go, I don't wish to continue watching." Luo Qidi shook his head as well and followed after Wang Qinian, slowly walking out of the pavilion. The result was already decided, there was nothing much to watch. "Your 5 moves are over, you can go down now," Xiao Chen said gently as he dodged a cluster of saber qi from Lin Feng. Lin Feng laughed coldly and said, "Don't speak as if you can casually defeat me at any time. You are currently being suppressed by me, stop finding excuses for yourself." Xiao Chen smiled faintly and did not argue. He executed the high-leveled technique in the Azure Dragon Cloud Soaring Art, Roaming Dragon's 9 transformations. 9 illusions that were difficult to differentiate from real ones appeared on the arena. Who see? The 9 figures attacked at the same time, turning into cool breezes, blowing at Lin Feng from all directions. The cool breezes blew gently, it was very refreshing. Lin Feng did not feel any killing intent or pressure at all. Instead, he even felt comfortable. By the time he realized something was wrong, there were 9 deep cavities in his chest. Suddenly, he felt pain and blood spurted out. The 9 figures merged back together and the lunar shadow saber returned to its scabbard. Xiao Chen stood behind Lin Feng and said indifferently, "My apologies. I can, indeed, defeat you casually. Regardless be it in the past or now." Pu Tong. Lin Feng collapsed to the ground and he muttered, "Clear wind chop." Seeing only the cool breeze and not the saber. One of Qingyan Peak's 7 secret techniques. I should have thought about that long ago. The chief examiner removed Lin Feng's identity token and waved his hands. Immediately, someone came and carried Lin Feng off the arena, bringing him away for treatment. The large crowd remained silent even after they saw this scene. Although they knew that it was possible Lin Feng was not a match for Xiao Chen, they had not expected Xiao Chen to be able to play with him like he was in the middle of his palm. With only 1 saber strike, the second strongest core disciple of Wanren Peak was defeated. This display of strength was similar to that of the top 10 core disciple rankers. Then, they remembered that Xiao Chen was currently only a peak superior grade martial grand master. If he managed to become a martial saint, his name would certainly appear on the top 10 of the Wind Cloud list. Mu Heng stood beside Zhong Lai and whispered, "Do you still think Yi Chen does not have the strength to challenge the top 10? Zhong Lai revealed the trace of a bitter smile, as he discovered he was not able to see through Xiao Chen's strength. He seemed to have an endless amount of trump cards. First, it was the Lingyun Saber Technique's 17th move. Now, it was Qingyan Peak's secret technique. I take back what I said earlier. He does indeed have the strength to challenge the top 10 of the Wind Cloud list. However, I will personally defeat him in the true ranking war at the end of the year." Mu Heng laughed and did not say any more, although he felt that Zhong Lai was somewhat naive. In this world, there were some people who would only go further and further after they overtook you. No matter how hard you work, eventually, you would not even be able to chase after their backs. In Mu Heng's opinion, Xiao Chen was one such person. He was neither arrogant nor impatient. He kept himself hidden, but once he revealed himself, even the heavens would be startled. In the highest part of the pavilion, the top 10 core disciples each occupied a spot to themselves. Murong Chong maintained a calm expression all the while. When he saw Xiao Chen execute the clear wind chop, he could not help but be slightly moved emotionally. He looked at Lu Ruyu's figure in the distance and muttered, "Clear wind chop. Ruyu, have you not given up yet? Regardless, I will make you realize that aside from me, no one else can help you revitalize Qingyan Peak." After that, Mu Heng and Zhang Lai easily defeated their opponents. The battles had finally ended. Including Lin Feng, there were 7 people who permanently lost their status as core disciples. The chief examiner looked at the crowd and said, "You may disperse. Mu Heng, Yi Chen, and Zhang Lai. Stay for a while." After the chief examiner led the rest away, he said to them, "According to the intentions of those above, the 3 of you have the right to participate in this mission as well. Don't ask me about the mission, you will find out about it 3 days later. What you need to do within these 3 days is to try and do your best to improve yourselves." The 3 of them glanced at each other. From their looks, there were traces of surprise. The round full moon hung high in the sky, gently giving off a quiet glow. This glow shone on every piece of land in Qingyan Peak. Xiao Chen was seated cross-legged on his bed in his personal courtyard. "It is time to break through to the 4th layer of the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation," Xiao Chen thought to himself. There was 3 more days' time. He had to make use of them to improve his cultivation technique in cultivation realm. The whirlpool in his body span very fast, and the essence slowly circulated through his meridians according to the circulation pathway of the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation. The surrounding lightning attributed spiritual energy rapidly gathered toward Xiao Chen. As the spiritual energy poured into Xiao Chen, the essence in his meridians slowly turned from transparent to a crystalline translucent purple. The Purple Thunder Divine Incantation had a threshold every 3 layers. After every 3 layers, there would be a qualitative change. The first 3 layers were only the foundation of the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation. Only when the 4th layer was reached could one then be barely considered to have been inducted. At the 4th layer, not only could one practice higher-leveled immortal spells, the Purple Thunder True Fire Origin Flame would be improved by another step. The most important thing was that the essence in his body would generate some lightning energy. In the future, the moves he made would generate a strong lightning attribute electric light. When he cultivated lightning-attributed martial techniques, it would be able to be accomplished with less effort. The Rushing Thunder Saber technique, which required a fortuitous encounter to advance, might even be improved. He might finally be able to practice the final move of the Rushing Thunder Saber technique, the Rushing Thunder Third Chain Chop. Hence, breaking through to the 4th layer from the 3rd was harder than breaking through to the previous layers. Fortunately, Xiao Chen had made ample preparations. Regardless, be it the 20 auspicious signs from the underground world, or the immortal grade flowing light marigold, they all raised the odds of successfully breaking through to the 4th layer. Time slowly went by, and after an hour, the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation had completed a great cycle. The crystalline translucent purple essence slowly returned to the whirlpool. Xiao Chen sent his consciousness down and saw some purple-colored arcs of electricity appearing at the bottom of the whirlpool. Although there was very little of it, the energy contained in them made Xiao Chen mildly astonished. After a while, the arcs of electricity condensed into a purple liquid and slowly dripped down. When I condense 361 purple electric lights, my Purple Thunder Divine Incantation should be able to advance to the 4th layer. Xiao Chen thought to himself. Xiao Chen sank his consciousness down and kept his mind clear. He continued to circulate the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation in an unhurried manner. The speed of the lightning attributed energy pouring into his body became faster. ZZ. Xiao Chen's room was filled with arcs of electricity. Occasionally, one could see some arcs of electricity flickering before fading away. The purple thunder divine incantation circulated another great cycle. This time the purple arcs of electricity condensed into 2 drops of purple liquid. The instant the drops of liquid dripped down, Xiao Chen felt like all the muscles in his body became saturated with boundless energy. His qi and blood were surging without rest. As time went by, Xiao Chen started to lose control of the speed of the purple thunder divine incantation's circulation. The circulation speed was very frightening. The arcs of electricity in the qi whirlpool were cracking incessantly. Ti-da. Ti-da. The purple liquid dripped down quickly. Xiao Chen condensed 100 drops of crystalline translucent purple liquid. Xiao Chen's hair and muscles were now glowing with a purple light. This was especially so for his hair. His originally black hair was now crystalline and translucent as it flew about in its extraordinary splendor. The gentle moonlight peered through the window, shining a pale yellow light on Xiao Chen. When the purple light and pale yellow light mixed together, it turned into an enchanting glow. When the purple thunder divine incantation circulated for 200 great cycles, the lightning attributed spiritual energy within the courtyard was no longer sufficient to satisfy Xiao Chen's needs. The range slowly expanded out until all the lightning attributed spiritual energy in the entire Qingyan Peak headed for Xiao Chen's room. The spiritual energy in Lingyun mountain range was significantly denser than regular places. All the lightning attributed spiritual energy in a peak was comparable to all the spiritual energy within a medium-sized city. Suddenly, all the surging lightning attributed spiritual energy formed a huge whirlpool above Xiao Chen's roof. This whirlpool seems to be synchronized with the whirlpool in Xiao Chen's body. Every time the whirlpool in Xiao Chen's body spun one round, a large amount of surging lightning attributed spiritual energy would pour into Xiao Chen's body. Within the whirlpool, thunder crackled. Occasionally, lightning would break through the night sky, lighting up the mountain. Such a huge event immediately startled everyone on Qingyan Peak. The divine saber camp bladesmen standing guard in front of the library revealed grave expressions. The person leading them did not know what was going on and wanted to send someone to check out the situation. Stay calm, don't be in such a rush. This is the result of someone's cultivation technique advancing. There is no need to be too astonished. Lu Qing walked out of the library and stopped the divine saber camp's people. Lu Qing looked downwards to the middle of the peak, looking at the huge whirlpool of thunder and lightning. The horrifying electricity in the whirlpool would break through the sky, tearing apart the night. Lu Qing's grave expression was as heavy as the divine saber camp's bladesmen's. He thought to himself, such a horrifying mysterious phenomenon. Could this be a heaven-ranked cultivation technique advancing? Lu Ruyu and Lu Sufeng was standing outside Xiao Chen's courtyard. Their faces were filled with astonishment. The two of them were only about 500 meters away from the whirlpool. They could clearly feel the horrifying pressure contained in it. The thunder was like a flood dragon roaring, the lightning was like a tongue of flames flickering in and out. Only pure lightning attributed spiritual energy was left in the air. The spiritual energy of other attributes was completely expelled. There was electricity flickering around everywhere with a highly pala sound. The light of the electricity was as dazzling as a solar eclipse. It made Lu Sufeng squint heavily. He was somewhat worried as he said, "Sis, will Yi Chen be fine?" "You crow beak." Lu Ruyu rapped on Lu Sufeng's head very hard as she said, "This sort of phenomenon has been recorded in the ancient texts before. It is the sign of a strong cultivation technique advancing. Yi Chen has always been cautious in the way he does things. If he was not completely prepared, he definitely would not take the risk in making the advancement." Although Lu Ruyu said that, the anxiousness in her eyes did not decrease at all. The ancient texts had also recorded that if the advancement failed, the cultivator would suffer a backlash. His meridians would break and he would end up dying. Suddenly, the whirlpool in the sky turned into countless bolts of lightning and went into Xiao Chen's room. The mysterious phenomenon instantly vanished, turning peaceful once again. Boom. After a moment of peace, a huge energy exploded out from Xiao Chen's room. The building collapsed and kicked up a large amount of dust. Xiao Chen's figure appeared from the dust-filled air. He leapt out with a "su" sound. The purple light in his eyes disappeared in a flash. 2 rays of purple light suddenly vanished into the dark of night. They were the size of pillars and very resplendent. It was very enchanting. Lu Sufeng looked at Xiao Chen and realized that he could no longer see through Xiao Chen's cultivation. In the past, he could still vaguely feel his cultivation realm. Now, he only felt one thing: he was unfathomable. Xiao Chen had noticed the 2 of them long ago. He smiled faintly and leapt over to the 2 of them. He left behind purple after images in the air. They only slowly thinned out and dissipated after a long time. The anxiety in Lu Ruyu's eyes vanished, and she revealed a joyful expression on her pretty face. Congratulations on crossing the first major hurdle of cultivation and successfully advancing to Martial Saint. This was not the first time for Xiao Chen to advance his Purple Thunder Divine Incantation at the same time as his cultivation realm. When he advanced to Martial Grand Master, the situation was similar. So he did not find it to be strange. On the contrary, it was a pleasant surprise. Xiao Chen smiled and said, "This is all thanks to the dense spiritual energy of Qingyan Peak. Otherwise, it would take at least a month to advance." These words were not in the least exaggerated. The spirit vein origin under the Lingyun mountain range was very possibly the core of the entire Zaihe province. If Xiao Chen chose to advance in another place, the overly thin spiritual energy would not allow him to advance as smoothly. Seeing Xiao Chen being so humble, Lu Ruyu's impression of him improved significantly. She smiled and said, "I shall not disturb you anymore. Your cultivation technique and cultivation realm both advanced at the same time. You should feel your strength out carefully. If there is anything that you do not understand, you can come to me for guidance. I will send someone to come and fix the house tomorrow." Lu Sufeng felt somewhat bitter and astringent in his heart when he looked at Xiao Chen. When Xiao Chen had just arrived, he was only an inferior grade martial grand master. His cultivation was significantly lower than Lu Sufeng's. However, within half a year, Xiao Chen had advanced 2 grades and then crossed the first major hurdle of cultivation, becoming a martial saint. Such talent could be ranked within the top 10 within the young disciples in the Heavenly Saber Pavilion. Lu Sufeng thought about himself. He had already was a peak superior grade martial grand master since a year ago. However, he was unable to sense the way to advancing to martial saint. It was only recently when he consumed the flowing light flower that he had some comprehensions toward it. However, Lu Sufeng had a mild temperament. Xiao Chen being able to advance only gave him some pressure. He smiled gently and said, "How frustrating. Now I can't catch up to you anymore." Xiao Chen smiled faintly and did not say anything. Lu Sufeng's talent was not low. Unfortunately, he did not have a resolute character. If he could remove some of his distractions, his cultivations would definitely improve significantly. After the 2 of them left, Xiao Chen started to inspect the condition of his body. He sank his consciousness into his body. The originally formless whirlpool in his dantian had now turned purple. With a thought from Xiao Chen, a purple essence poured out from the purple whirlpool. Then, it flowed along his meridians into his right hand. Shua. The purple energy left his body without any obstruction and formed a small strand of saber chi in the air. It was thrown forward and a small tree 10 meters in front easily snapped into half. Where the tree cracked apart, there were arcs of electricity jumping around that did not scatter for a while. Xiao Chen revealed a complicated expression. He said, "The essence in my body has turned into pure lightning attributed essence. If I were to practice lightning attributed martial techniques, I would definitely achieve more with less effort. However, it is too pure. There will be difficulties in comprehending martial techniques of other attributes." Xiao Chen was currently focused on the Lingyun Saber technique. The Lingyun Saber technique had no requirements for attributes. However, its states were the state of mountains and the state of clouds. If he wanted to comprehend it further, he had to overcome the state of thunder in his body. This would make it much more difficult for him to comprehend this. Xiao Chen collected his thoughts and said, "Never mind, I won't think about this problem for now. I should check the improvements of the Purple Thunder True Fire first." With a thought from Xiao Chen, a fierce flame started burning in his right eye. Xiao Chen shouted, "Come!" The purple flames immediately gushed out like a waterfall. Xiao Chen opened his right palm and the small ball-sized flame floated into his hand. In the center of the flame, there was a resplendent arc of electricity jumping around. It gave the purple flame a strange hue. The resplendent arc of electricity was the Purple Thunder True Fire's origin flame. Now that the Purple Thunder Divine Incantation had advanced to the 4th layer, Xiao Chen could finally bring out the origin flame. In the Tianyu continent, flames had different attributes as well. There were flames of extreme frost which could instantly freeze the target into an ice pillar, before scattering it into countless pieces. There were also warm nourishing flames that could heal wounds and nourish the body. They only had the effect of being a miracle cure. There were also ghost flames with a rotting attribute. Regardless of how strong the opponent's defense was, it could easily rot it away. There was the incredibly tyrannical dragon flame. It could conquer every obstacle, and nothing could block it. It surpassed countless other flames, and its effects were not simply just burning. As for Xiao Chen's Purple Thunder True Fire, it was a lightning attribute flame. Its origin flame was also a stand of lightning. The flame contained limitless electrical arcs. "Shoot!" Xiao Chen shouted, and the purple flame in his hand turned into a sharp arrow, firing into the dark night. The purple arrow left behind a flaming tail as it sliced apart the dark of night. It instantly flew more than 1,000 meters, faster than the speed of sound. It was unknown how far it flew, only a spot of light moving like a meteor could be seen in the night sky. After a long time, a resplendent light lit up the distant night sky. Then, countless arcs of electricity tore the sky apart. Rumble. The instant the arrow exploded, Xiao Chen could clearly feel the loss of a significant amount of essence. Xiao Chen looked at the sky in the direction where the arrow flew. He was somewhat astonished as he said, "What a fast speed. If I used this suddenly, there would be no one who could block this." However, now was not the time to be concerned about this. Xiao Chen leapt up gently and executed the Azure Dragon Cloud Soaring art. He disappeared from the courtyard and headed to a desolate forest in Qingyan Peak's back mountain. Xiao Chen used his spiritual sense to scan his surroundings. When he was sure that there was no one around, Xiao Chen took out the broken sword he had obtained from the ancient remnant from the Universe Ring. This broken sword was very similar to the Thunder Emperor's Thunderwood sword when he found it. Aside from being incredibly sharp, there was nothing else special about it. However, when he placed it next to the Lunar Shadow Saber, it generated an intense reaction. They were both attracted to each other. Xiao Chen wanted to melt it a long time ago. Unfortunately, the Purple Thunder True Fire, which was able to melt the Thunderwood sword, was unable to do so to this broken sword. Fortunately, the Purple Thunder True Fire had reached the next layer. Xiao Chen was prepared to give it another try, to see if there would be any reaction when he tried to melt it again. Xiao Chen summoned the purple thunder true fire. Then, he walked over to the center of the flame with the broken sword in hand. His spiritual sense wrapped around the broken sword as he floated in the center of the flame stably. Who see? The moment the flames touched the broken sword, it immediately fired a resplendent bolt of electricity, crackling incessantly. A black smoke wafted out from the surface of the broken sword. The sword's appearance seemed to have completely changed, all the dust on its surface was removed, and it gave off a glow once again. Wang! Wang! The lunar shadow saber in Xiao Chen's left hand could not resist trembling. The trembling grew stronger and stronger over time. In the end, Xiao Chen was almost unable to hold on to it. Could it be that the broken sword really contains a portion of the battle sage origins? Xiao Chen said to himself. The battle sage origin was the strongest offensive qi. Because it was too strong, it was split into 6 portions, each one containing a sub-divine weapon. In the past, the Thunder Emperor spent the latter half of his life searching for the remaining 5 portions of battle sage origins. In the end, no one knew how many he found and what results he obtained. Who in the world injured the Thunder Emperor and broke his Thunderwood sword, leaving him with no choice but to seal the broken sword in moonstone for 1,000 years? No one today truly knew the answer to that question. Back then, with the Thunderwood sword in his hands, he was peerless under the heavens. At a young age, he had already fought all over the great Qin nation. There were none who could measure up to him. Within the Tianyu continent, he was considered a peak expert. The number of people who could force him to use his full strength could be counted on one hand. Given so, who could force him to a dead end? Aside from Ao Zhao, no one knew the answer. However, Ao Zhao avoided answering this question, refusing to let Xiao Chen know. It was clear that she was fearful of the events of 1,000 years ago. Xiao Chen had his own speculations about it. The Thunder Emperor might have found the other 5 sub-divine weapons containing the battle sage origins. However, when he wanted to merge them to form a divine weapon, someone severely injured him. The 5 sub-divine weapons separated and dispersed again, and the Thunderwood sword broke in half. Who would fear the soon-to-become divine weapon Thunderwood sword? The answer was clear, it was definitely the owner of one of the divine weapons. Since the day of the divine weapon's creation, only 10 divine weapons existed. It seemed that even the heavens feared the divine weapons. As long as there was the birth of a new divine weapon, there would be the fall of a divine weapon. The number of divine weapons that could exist could not exceed 10. The owner of said divine weapon was afraid of his divine weapon falling. Hence, he chose to make a preemptive move, relying on the might of the divine weapon to completely defeat the Thunder Emperor, Sang Mu. This speculation was very reasonable, but there was no evidence to support it. Thus, Xiao Chen did not dare be confident of his guesses, whether the events of the past were the same as he speculated. The temperature of the released Purple Thunder True Fire Origin flame was multiple times higher than it was before. It reached a horrifying temperature of, at least, 5,000 degrees. Xiao Chen observed very carefully as the broken sword slowly started to melt, turning into a liquid and gradually dripping down. Hai Kai. The instant the melted liquid dripped down, it floated to the scabbard containing the lunar shadow saber in Xiao Chen's left hand. It was like it was alive. It headed for the crack at the mouth of the scabbard, trying to enter the scabbard and merge with the lunar shadow saber. With a "pooh" sound, the plain scabbard emitted a horrifying energy, deflecting away the liquid that flew over. Xiao Chen sent out a strand of his spiritual sense and gathered all the molten metal in the air. He frowned tightly. He did not understand the situation. What is going on? When the broken sword melted completely, and all the molten metal gathered together, it was repeatedly wobbling like the jello of earth. It was extremely strange. Who Suddenly a black figure flew out from the gathered molten metal, heading for Xiao Chen's face quickly. Xiao Chen prepared long ago. He instantly used his spiritual sense to form a thick wall in front of him. It was impregnable. The figure crashed into the wall and bounced back. Ow! Ow! The figure let out pained cries. Xiao Chen was finally able to see its appearance clearly. He looked exactly like a human, there was no difference at all. However, it was extremely weak. Its body gave off an evil aura, causing one to feel repulsed. So, it is the weapon spirit of the sub-divine weapon. Because the broken sword was not cared for properly, it became an evil vicious spirit. Now that Xiao Chen knew what it was, he did not hesitate. No wonder the scabbard would reject this thing, stopping it from merging with the lunar shadow saber. So, this was the reason. After a weapon spirit turned into a vicious spirit, it would lose all its consciousness. It transformed into a monster that only knew how to kill. If it merged into a spirit weapon, it would turn the spirit weapon into an evil weapon, causing harm to the world. In the Tianyu continent, there were many evil cultivators who collected these vicious spirits, cultivating them into evil weapons to strengthen themselves. If this vicious spirit, which was once a sub-divine weapon spirit, occupied the lunar shadow saber, the lunar shadow saber would immediately turn into an exceptional evil weapon. Even Xiao Chen would be affected by it. However, after this vicious spirit underwent the tempering of the purple thunder true fire, its strength significantly diminished. It was not able to penetrate through the wall Xiao Chen laid down. Instead, it even injured itself. The vicious spirit seemed to know Xiao Chen's strength. He cried out and immediately tried to fly into the distance, thinking of fleeing this place. Running. You think you can run? Purple thunder true fire, shoot. As Xiao Chen saw the vicious spirit trying to run, he smiled faintly and turned the purple thunder true fire into a sharp arrow. As it shot out, it left behind a long meteor tail. It was like a resplendent bolt of electricity surpassed the speed of sound and caught up to the black vicious spirit in an instant before piercing through it. Boom. The purple flames exploded, the might of the origin flame completely unleashed. A bright electric light lit up the forest like it was day. The black vicious spirit cried miserably and disappeared into nothing, completely vanishing from this world. Xiao Chen felt the tremendous loss of essence and sighed, I only used it twice, and I have exhausted a large amount of my essence. It seems like I can only use this move as my trump card. After the vicious spirit died, the molten metal from the broken sword flew towards the lunar shadow saber once again. This time, the strange scabbard did not obstruct it. It released the lunar shadow saber that had been trying to get out. The snow-white lunar shadow saber trembled in the air incessantly. The molten metal seemed to have infused into it. It did not cause any ripples or fluctuations as it completely permeated the lunar shadow saber. When the final drop of molten metal completely permeated the lunar shadow saber, it became even more dazzling. Xiao Chen stretched out his hand and grasped the lunar shadow saber. He could immediately feel that the strength of the saber had increased significantly. The lunar shadow saber advanced the initial inferior grade earth rank to medial grade earth ranked. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen did not see the so-called battle sage origins. Xiao Chen was mildly disappointed. Since there is no battle sage origin, why did Ao Zhao urgently tell me to refine this broken sword quickly? Since this was something he could not understand, he would temporarily shove it to a side. This has always been the way Xiao Chen did things. He would not waste time on an unsolvable problem. When the boat reached to the pier head, it would go straight with the current, the mystery would resolve someday. TL note. When the boat reached to the pier head, it would go straight with the current. This means everything will be alright, everything will fit into place when the time comes. It was already very late. After advancing to Martial Saint, there were improvements in other aspects. It was not convenient for Xiao Chen to check on all of them. There were still 3 days, it was sufficient for him to stabilize his cultivation. 3 days went by in a flash. Xiao Chen stabilized his cultivation over the past 3 days. When there was something he did not understand, he went directly to Lu Ruyu for guidance. Lu Ruyu had been a martial saint for much longer than Xiao Chen. Hence, she had much more experience. She passed down everything she knew without holding anything back. For example, she taught him about the speed of condensing saber qi, how to make it faster, and how to use the least amount of essence to achieve the greatest effect. Xiao Chen's comprehension abilities had originally been high. After he consumed the flowing light flower, his comprehension abilities became even higher. He was able to understand all of Lu Ruyu's explanations by listening once. He could even deduce many things from one case. All this benefited Xiao Chen in many ways, his strength increased significantly. The time now was night, the night sky was completely cloudless for miles. One could see the countless stars flickering in the night sky with one glance. The scene was extraordinarily beautiful. Tomorrow, they would issue the mission. Xiao Chen was not planning to cultivate tonight. He intended to have a good sleep to replenish his spirit. To a cultivator, the effects of meditating were better than sleeping for rest. So, many cultivators would cultivate in place of sleep. Doing so would not cause any problems for the spirit, but it was unable to reach the level where the mind completely relaxed. After all, when one was cultivating, their mind was still alert. One would immediately feel the movements of every gust of wind or blade of grass. Hence, only sleep could truly allow the whole body to relax. It allowed every aspect of the cultivator's spirit, qi, and mind to recover to the peak state. As Xiao Chen laid on his bed, he closed his eyes, keeping his mind clear. After 10 minutes, his breathing was calm and stable, his chest rose and fell with his breathing. Soon, he slowly drifted into a dream. Xiao Chen was in a daze for an unknown period. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. The scene in front of him was no longer that of his room. There were clouds surround the area, the sun was bright in the sky. When looking into the distance, many buildings that looked as small as ants appeared in his vision. This was one of the summits in Lingyun mountain range. Is this my dream? Xiao Chen thought hazily. This was because the time in this space did not match what he felt it should be. The most important thing was that he could not shake off that hazy feeling. When he turned around, he saw the previous peak master of Qingyan Peak, Lu Ruyu's father, Lu Tianyu, sitting on a rock. Lu Tianyu's weathered face, filled with deep gashes, was not startled. He simply watched Xiao Chen quietly. You do not seem to be surprised. Xiao Chen already guessed this was the person who entered his dream, so he was not too surprised. After all, within the Heavenly Saber Pavilion, he was the only one Xiao Chen could think of who had such strong mental strength and could break past his defenses. Xiao Chen said indifferently, "There is nothing strange about this. I am simply not used to others intruding my dreams. My apologies." Right after Xiao Chen spoke, the surroundings suddenly changed. The clouds and wind turned illusionary, the clouds rolled, and the space suddenly shattered like glass. Lu Tianyu sat cross-legged on a rock at the summit of Qingyan Peak. The expression on his face changed erratically as he muttered, "This brat's mental strength is so strong. If I don't use the divine weapon, there is no way to stop him." Under cover of night, Xiao Chen's figure repeatedly flickered as he headed rapidly to Qingyan Peak's summit. He paused at the vertical cliff for a while before using the gravity spell and flying up. Xiao Chen landed on summit once again. The scene was the same as in his dream. When he saw the old man on the rock, he said, "Please don't intrude into my dreams the next time you are looking for me." Everyone hid their secrets in the depths of their dreams. If others discovered these secrets, they could be used by their opponents to shake their mental state when they fought. Even so, it was extremely difficult to enter the deep parts of one's dreams, especially for someone with powerful mental strength like Xiao Chen. Furthermore, Lu Tianyu did not do this. However, Xiao Chen felt it was dangerous and was not pleased. Lu Tianyu smiled faintly and did not reply Xiao Chen. He said, "Do you remember what you promised me?" Xiao Chen nodded, "I remember. As long as it is something within my abilities and not against my conscience, I will do it." "Do you know about the mission you are going on tomorrow?" Lu Tianyu asked as he watched Xiao Chen. "Have you ever wondered why the numbers and ages are controlled, or why we issued the Saber Emperor convening order?" Naturally, Xiao Chen had thought about it before. However, the people above did not wish to say anything. The clues left behind could not lead to anything conclusive. If soldiers come, we will fight them with weapons. If a flood comes, we defend with earth. It will be fine facing it as according to the situation. Thus, Xiao Chen did not think about this question for long. TL note. If soldiers come, we will fight them with weapons. If a flood comes, we defend with earth. This means to adapt to the situation with the appropriate measure. Since Lu Tianyu asked this, could there be a relation between his request and this mission? Thinking of this, Xiao Chen could not help but ask, "Does your request have something to do with this mission?" "That's right, I shall not beat around the bush. Since it is the final day, there is no more need to keep it a secret." After Lu Tianyu spoke, he paused for a while. His expression turned graver. "You should have heard about the demonic calamity that happened 20 years ago. What you are aware of is likely only the tip of the iceberg. The losses of the Heavenly Saber Pavilion in that disaster were much higher than the rumors. We lost an inferior grade martial sage, 10 martial monarchs, and numerous martial kings. The biggest loss was the person who had the highest chance of becoming a martial emperor, the previous pavilion master." When Xiao Chen heard this, he could not help but feel astonished. Not only was a martial sage dead, but there were also 10 martial monarchs and countless martial kings. Such a strong force was sufficient to overthrow the entire Great Qin nation. Exactly how horrifying was a force required to be to annihilate all these people? When Lu Tianyu saw Xiao Chen's surprised expression, he continued, "The strength of the demons from the abyss of the demonic world is much more horrifying than you imagine. The boundless abyss has a total of 18 realms, each realm is its own world. The first realm, which is the smallest, is multiple times larger than all of the Tianyu continent. Each realm is ruled by a realm lord. As for how strong this realm lord is, we have no way to classify him with the system of ranking we have in the Tianyu continent. Back when the Heavenly Saber Pavilion was suffering from the demonic calamity, we only faced the weakest one of the 18 demon generals under the realm lord. Even after throwing in all we had, we did not manage to kill this demon general, we were only able to deal with him temporarily." Lu Tianyu explained the history of that time to Xiao Chen in great detail. Although his words were rather mild, Xiao Chen could imagine what a horrifying strength they had. If a martial emperor did not show up, they would be unable to do anything to any one of the demon generals under the realm lord. Xiao Chen nodded and asked, "Are you saying our mission this time has to do with the demonic world abyss?" Lu Tianyu nodded, "That's right. 20 years ago, the Heavenly Saber Pavilion only sealed that spatial crack temporarily. It has not yet been fixed." "It has not yet been fixed?" Xiao Chen asked about the doubt in his heart. "Isn't it said that the people from the 3 Holy Lands will come and patch it every 20 years? Could it be that they have not come to the Heavenly Saber Pavilion for 40 years already?" Lu Tianyu nodded again, "It is as you said. The 3 Holy Lands have indeed not arrived at the Heavenly Saber Pavilion for 40 years. Why? Isn't it the responsibility of the 3 Holy Lands to seal the spatial cracks? Xiao Chen asked. He was feeling confused. Responsibility. Lu Tianyu laughed in a self-mocking manner. You are too naive. Do you think there really are such noble people in this world, to go around and do charitable work everywhere without expecting any return? In the eyes of the Three Holy Land, an insignificant heaven saber pavilion is considered nothing. They are the true rulers of this continent. Things are separated in order of priority. Even if they were to deal with it, they would have to start with the major ones first. What may seem urgent to you could be considered nothing in their eyes. Naturally, they have to deal with what is important first. In the past, the reason the Three Holy Lands would always send someone is that the Heavenly Saber Pavilion had an absolute genius who could become a martial emperor before the age of 50. He was someone who caught their attention. Now that he is dead, they may have even forgotten there is a Heavenly Saber Pavilion in the Great Qin nation. Xiao Chen frowned tightly and pondered deeply. He did not expect such a simple matter to have so many hidden secrets. After organizing his thoughts, Xiao Chen said, based on what you said, martial sages and martial monarchs have no way to deal with this problem. I am just an insignificant martial saint, how could I have the ability to do anything? Martial sages and martial monarchs are indeed unable to do anything. However, you forget that you have another identity, the Thunder Emperor's inheritor. Lu Tianyu looked at Xiao Chen and said in a sullen voice, 1,000 years ago, the seal was originally complete. If it were not for the Thunder Emperor, the seal would not have broke. After 1,000 years, you have the responsibility, the ability, and the obligation to deal with the mess the Thunder Emperor left behind. Xiao Chen's expression turned cold. He said in a frosty voice, you don't have to use the Thunder Emperor's name to pressure me. Although I am the Thunder Emperor's inheritor, I am not him. I hope you will understand this clearly. I am helping you out of my own will. If it is not within my capabilities, I will choose another method to repay you. Your request has clearly exceeded my capabilities. My apologies, I cannot accept this. Goodbye. This was something even a martial sage could not solve. What could he accomplish by going? Lu Tianyu clearly wanted to send him off to death because of his status as the Thunder Emperor's inheritor. Do you think I gave you that scabbard for no reason? Or did you think it was a coincidence for your body to contain only pure lightning attributed essence? Do you know your purpose in coming to the Heavenly Saber Pavilion? Just as Xiao Chen was preparing to jump off the cliff, Lu Tianyu's unhurried voice sounded from behind him. Xiao Chen could not help but stop. He turned around to face Lu Tianyu and asked, what do you mean? Lu Tianyu did not answer Xiao Chen's question directly. He waved his hand, and a strong suction force pulled Xiao Chen's lunar shadow saber over. Huang Dang. A snow-white saber light lit up Xiao Chen's face in the dark night, making him feel somewhat uncomfortable. Lu Tianyu looked at the snow-white lunar shadow saber and muttered, this is a pretty good saber. You have merged in two broken swords. Its might is significantly stronger than when I last saw it. How unfortunate the owner of the saber does not know how to use it. Right after Lu Tianyu spoke, he threw the saber into the dark night sky. The saber blade suddenly released a boundless lightning. Rumble. There were flashes of lightning and crackles of thunder. A dazzling light tore through the night sky, leaving a void darker than the night sky. In the end, the electric light gathered together, and the saber light withdrew itself. Everywhere the saber passed sliced into two halves with a zzz sound, falling down both sides. Xiao Chen watched all this, dumbfounded. This saber strike even cut apart the sky. Ka-ca. Lu Tianyan held the scabbard and pointed it to the sky. The lunar shadow saber moved in an arc and returned to the scabbard accurately. After a long time, the sliced-apart night sky started to mend slowly. Lu Tianyu tossed the lunar shadow saber back to Xiao Chen. You can exhibit this kind of strength too. However, there is only one opportunity. Remember, you have only one opportunity. Lu Tianyu ignored Xiao Chen's shocked expression and continued, "The thing that I requested of you is naturally something within your capabilities. You don't have to worry about this. Actually, if you think about it carefully, you will understand the reason behind this. Why are the strong elders not going and only sending the young disciples? Furthermore, why is there a restriction on the number of people? It is because of the body's bone age. Once you exceed 24 years old, there is no way to enter that space. What you are going to be facing are not true demons. They are only projections of these demons." Xiao Chen caught the lunar shadow saber, and his expression became calm again. He said indifferently, "Get straight to the point. What do I need to do to execute that saber strike from earlier?" The shock the earlier saber strike gave Xiao Chen was simply too great. He never expected the lunar shadow saber to be capable of showing such a great display of strength. Xiao Chen's heart filled with doubt. When he was in the miniature ancient absolute saber formation, he felt the true strength of the lunar shadow saber was far from being as simple as he had experienced. Lu Tianyu smiled and said, "What you need to do is very simple. You have to kill the projection of the 18th demon general at the crucial moment. When you open your eyes, you will know how to execute this saber strike. In the end, this mission is still very dangerous. After you complete it, I will tell you where the third broken sword is." When I open my eyes. What does that mean? Right after Lu Tianyu spoke, his figure started to turn blurry before Xiao Chen's eyes. After a while, this space started cracking and eventually turned into nothing. Who? Xiao Chen opened his eyes and sat up immediately. He looked at his surroundings. It was the room in which he slept. He looked out the window. The sky was starting to brighten up. It was still very dimly lit. Xiao Chen got up and pushed aside the blanket before walking out to the courtyard. He looked around the familiar surroundings. Cold sweat ran down his back. He looked at the distant summit and muttered, "So, I did not break apart the dream after all. That was still a dream. What a joke." After a long time, Xiao Chen recovered his wits. He drew the lunar shadow saber in his hand, the snow-white blade gleaming all over. It was incredibly sharp. The instant the saber slid out of the scabbard, Xiao Chen felt an extremely complicated formation within the lunar shadow saber. The formation markings were very dense, like a spider web. There was a resplendent light in the middle of the formation. It looked like it could explode at anything. Xiao Chen immediately understood what Lu Tianyu meant by, "You will know how to execute that move when you open your eyes." The secret lay in the center of the formation. Once he made the resplendent light explode, he would probably be able to execute that move. Xiao Chen tested it a little. He extended his spiritual sense into it and touched that light gently. Kai! Kai! A horrifying energy immediately rushed out of the center of the formation, extending into its surroundings. The spider web-like formation markers started to glow a little. Xiao Chen was startled and quickly withdrew his spiritual sense. The energy on the formation immediately scattered like a receding tide. So, that is how one uses this. Using my spiritual sense is like a spark lighting explosives, just a little will set it off. Xiao Chen sheathed the lunar shadow saber back into the scabbard, immediately breaking the connection between his spiritual sense and the strange formation. Xiao Chen looked at the scabbard and shook his head as he muttered to himself, "What a strange scabbard, I should change to a new one in the future." When the sky turned bright, Lu Ruyu came to Xiao Chen's courtyard, looking for him. Then, she told him the purpose of her visit. Xiao Chen was somewhat astonished. He said, "Elder sister Ruyu, you have to participate in this mission as well." Lu Ruyu laughed and said, "The rule for this mission is, all experts under the age of 24 in the Heavenly Saber Pavilion have to participate. I happen to meet the requirement barely. I'm getting old. This mission mostly consists of people like you, people around the age of 18 or 19. Xiao Chen rubbed his nose and said, "Elder sister Ruyu. Actually, you look like you are still 17 or 18. Furthermore, you have a disposition that those little girls do not have." Lu Ruyu blushed slightly and looked at Xiao Chen in surprise. She said, "That is surprising. I do not think I have ever seen you praise a girl before. You practically spend all your time cultivating, you barely even speak. You have to pace yourself in cultivation, don't get too engrossed in it. Otherwise, you might develop a heart demon in future." When Xiao Chen heard this, he was slightly stunned. His character had always been more on the reserved side. In his original world, he did not engage in long conversations. After he arrived in this cruel world, his character became even more apparent. There was no need to discuss anything unnecessary, there was no need to do anything unnecessary. This had always been his principle on how to deal with other people. Today, he said something unprecedented and praised Lu Ruyu's looks so boldly. Even he was surprised at this. Xiao Chen did not wish to waste too much time on this, so he changed the topic and said, "What exactly are the details of this mission?" "Elder sister Ruyu, have you received any news?" Lu Ruyu shook her head and said, "I am not clear on it either. I only know that the person heading this operation is Lu Chen. It is the Lu Chen you met in the returning Cloud Hall." Lu Chen. Xiao Chen had a pretty deep impression of this person. He is only 24 years old. Is he even stronger than elder sister Ruyu? Since Lu Chen was the person in charge, then his cultivation must be the highest among the crowd. Lu Ruyu's cultivation was horrifying already. Was Lu Chen even more horrifying than Lu Ruyu? Lu Ruyu nodded and said, "His cultivation is about the same as mine. However, the martial techniques he practices are quite special. So, his combat prowess is slightly stronger than mine. However, he is 1 year younger than I am." Xiao Chen blushed with shame in his heart. He was only 23 years old, and he was very close to becoming a martial king. Originally, Xiao Chen thought that, aside from Lu Ruyu, there were no other geniuses on the same level. It looked like it was as the executive elder of the Hall of Contributions said. Talent was worth the least in the Heavenly Saber Pavilion. When Lu Ruyu saw Xiao Chen feeling dejected, she consoled him, "There is no need to be discouraged. Lu Chen is being nurtured to be the next leader of the Divine Saber Camp. He has enjoyed the best conditions within the Heavenly Saber Pavilion. Medicinal pills, spirit stones, secret techniques, and there are Deathsworn soldiers for him to cultivate a killing chi. That's all too much to compete with." Xiao Chen understood the terror of the Divine Saber Camp long ago. They could be called the true elites of the Heavenly Saber Pavilion, the final line of defense. It was normal for their future leader to have such strong cultivation. ZZ. A green bird circled above them in the sky before landing. Lu Ruyu signaled Xiao Chen to leap on. Then, they headed to the heaven viewing platform. Lu Ruyu's skills of piloting the bird were significantly better than Lu Sufeng's. They only spent a quarter of the time traveling to the drill grounds of the heaven viewing platform. There were not many people on the drill grounds yet. No one could be seen in the surrounding spectator stands, it seemed so empty. Not long after they landed, an elder led away Lu Ruyu. Xiao Chen watched as she left. He thought to himself, "It looks like Lu Ruyu will know some of the details in advance." "Yi Chen. How long have you been here?" Not long after Lu Ruyu left, two familiar people walked over to Xiao Chen. They were Mu Heng and Zhang Lai, who arrived much earlier. Xiao Chen was somewhat surprised that they were together. "I just arrived. Have you guys heard anything about this mission?" Lu Tianyu revealed little information to Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen felt quite uncertain. The statuses of these two were not ordinary, they should have received some inside news. Mu Heng had a somewhat grave expression as he said, "My father did not reveal much information to me. However, he used a phrase to describe this mission. 9 deaths out of 10, only one will live." That was not much information. Xiao Chen was somewhat disappointed. It was not more than what he knew. "Since it is so dangerous, why does your father dare send you?" When Mu Heng heard this, he took out a talisman. This is a divine flame talisman. It can pierce through space in an instant. Zhong Lai has one as well. Divine flame talisman. Xiao Chen had heard of this before. It was extremely expensive. It originated from the Great Jin nation and frequently lacked supply. Usually, once one appeared in the Great Qin nation, it would be taken immediately. He did not expect each of them to have one. With the divine flame talisman, they would be able to preserve their lives during a crucial moment. No wonder they dared to participate in this dangerous mission. They had prepared their escape route long ago. Mu Heng continued to say, "The news I received mentioned that there is a limited number of divine flame talismans. Aside from the top 10 core disciple rankers on the Wind Cloud list, the Heavenly Saber Pavilion's Elders Assembly have not issued the others a divine flame talisman." Xiao Chen could understand why it was so. This was simply natural selection. The more outstanding people would have preferential treatment. This would be the same regardless of wherever you were. With Lu Tianyu's status, he was able to obtain a divine flame talisman. However, why did he not give one to Xiao Chen? The reason was not difficult to guess. TL note. It is not specifically mentioned in the Raws, but I believe the reason is that Lu Tianyu gave it to Lu Ruyu, his daughter. Zhong Lai, who had been silent all the while, suddenly spoke, "Yi Chen, you broke through to Martial Saint." Xiao Chen nodded and smiled gently, "Didn't you do the same as well?" When Zhong Lai heard this, he smiled bitterly, "I thought by reaching Martial Saint, I would be able to surpass you slightly. Who knew you became a Martial Saint as well?" People arrived at the drill grounds one after another. The Elders' Assembly took away the top 10 on the Wind Cloud list the moment they arrived. It was likely that they were distributing the divine flame talismans. The three of them continued chatting for a long time, exchanging their experiences and understanding. They had quite impressive talents and some unique understanding of saber techniques. After they chatted, the three of them felt they benefited greatly. There were many questions which they could not figure out the answer to normally, but they managed to after that. This was especially true for Xiao Chen and Zhong Lai. The two of them had practiced their Lingyun saber technique to great perfection. However, they comprehended it differently. After they exchanged their experiences, they gained further comprehensions. "Yi Chen, come over here for a while. I need to speak to you." Lu Ruyu's melodious voice came from ahead. Xiao Chen took his leave from the two and quickly walked over. Lu Ruyu had an exceptionally grave expression. She led Xiao Chen to a deserted place. Then, she took out a divine flame talisman. "This is a divine flame talisman. It can save your life at a crucial moment. Take it." Xiao Chen was somewhat stunned. He did not expect Lu Ruyu to give him her divine flame talisman. However, since Lu Tianyu did not give him a divine flame talisman, he probably had other intentions. Xiao Chen shook his head and refused it. "You should only have one divine flame talisman. You should keep it for yourself. I have my movement technique to escape. It should be more than enough." Lu Ruyu frowned and said somewhat angrily, "Are you saying your movement technique is better than mine? Now that your strength has improved, you are looking down on your master." Xiao Chen did not know what to do. He quickly explained, "No, that is not what I meant. I am saying that. Stop explaining yourself. If I tell you to take it, then take it. Otherwise, I really will get angry." Lu Ruyu's temper began to flare. Xiao Chen could only helplessly receive the divine flame talisman Lu Ruyu passed to him. "Thank you, elder sister Ruyu." After Lu Ruyu saw Xiao Chen take the divine flame talisman, her expression immediately turned warm. She said, "That's the way. I cannot be with you on this mission. I just received some news. There is a total of 100 people participating in this mission. You will be divided into 10 teams, each team will consist of 10 people. The top 10 core disciple rankers on the wind cloud list will lead them. This mission is very dangerous, you have to be careful." After Lu Ruyu spoke, she left Xiao Chen in a hurry. It was obvious she was in a rush. Xiao Chen thought to himself, it looks like Lu Ruyu already knows about the details of this mission. Given how much of a rush she is in, this mission should be more dangerous than I originally thought. When Xiao Chen returned to the drill grounds, Mu Heng and Zhong Lai immediately waved to him, indicating for him to come over. Xiao Chen nodded and quickly walked over. On the drill grounds, all 100 people who were participating in the mission had gathered. The Elders' Assembly's people seemed to be discussing something anxiously on the tall platform in front. Suddenly, Zhong Lai asked in a whisper, "Yi Chen, did your master reveal any information? I saw her standing with the elders, she should know something, right?" When Mu Heng heard that, he watched Xiao Chen curiously. Xiao Chen shook his head, "She did not say anything. She only gave me a divine flame talisman. Anyway, we are about to depart, they will reveal the answer to us soon." Mu Heng nodded and said, "That's true, there is no point in us making any wild speculations. We will not be able to obtain any answers. We might as well wait calmly." After waiting for a long time, there was still no news. The people in the drill grounds were starting to grow impatient. When all the sounds of discussion were combined, it was extremely noisy. Xiao Chen tilted to the side and listened for a while. They were all guesses as to the contents of the missions. What surprised him was that many people managed to make a correct rough guess. Up on the tall platform, the discussion had ended. The main hall's Elders' Assembly's first elder, Zhang Kai, heard the noise from the drill grounds and frowned slightly. Silence. Based on the saber in my hand. Although it was simply an ordinary word, it carried a certain might. It reverberated in everybody's ears, causing them not to dare have any intention of disobeying. He infused his mental strength into his words, Xiao Chen thought to himself quietly. He scanned him with his spiritual sense and could clearly feel it. Zhang Kai had merged his strong mental strength into the word. Otherwise, it would not have achieved such a result. When he had the opportunity, he could give it a try. Xiao Chen had comprehended something from the word. Zhang Kai was satisfied with the reaction of the crowd. After muttering to himself a while, he said, "The mission is about to start. I believe most of you have guessed the importance of this mission. Missions that make the Heavenly Saber Pavilion issue the Saber Emperor convening order are few. This mission concerns the survival of the Heavenly Saber Pavilion. I hope you will put forth your best effort in this. After his mission is complete, everyone will receive 100 medial grade spirit stones. You may also free pick one peak earth ranked cultivation technique, spirit weapon, and battle armor." After he spoke, everyone was dumbfounded. They did not expect the rewards from the Heavenly Saber Pavilion to be so generous. 100 medial grade spirit stones exchanged for 10,000 inferior grade spirit stones. Of course, no one was silly enough to exchange medial grade spirit stones for inferior grade spirit stones. This was simply just a comparison. To a cultivator who advanced to martial saint, inferior grade spirit stones were already insufficient to satisfy them. They would be able to exhaust an inferior grade spirit stone with a day. Furthermore, its effects would not be as good as before. If one advanced to medial grade martial saint, the effects of inferior grade spirit stones became even weaker. When one advanced to superior grade martial saint, Inferior grade spirit stones could only be used to recover spiritual energy, they would no longer help in cultivation. This was because the density of spiritual energy in inferior grade spirit stones was too thin. At that point, they could only aid cultivation by changing to medial grade spirit stones. If all 100 people could come out successfully, the Heavenly Saber Pavilion had to take out 10,000 medial grade spirit stones. Xiao Chen guessed this was at least a fifth of the Heavenly Saber Pavilion's storage. After all, the spirit mines in the Great Qin nation were not ranked very high. It would be difficult if one wanted to obtain medial grade spirit stones. Zhang Lai, who stood to the side, sighed, "What a large amount. My Zhang clan saved for several hundred years in Yunyang City, and we only have tens of spirit stones. We cannot bear to use them." Xiao Chen frowned tightly, his thoughts went even further. The rewards of a mission normally correlated to the danger of the mission. The higher the rewards, the more difficult the mission would be. Zhang Kai pointed to Lu Chen and Lu Ruyu, who were beside him. Then he continued, "Lu Chen and Lu Ruyu will be responsible for this operation. Later, you will all be divided into 10 small teams. The team captains will be the top 10 core disciples on the Wind Cloud list. If you have any questions, you may ask the team captain directly. The team captains have absolute authority in this mission. You must obey the orders of the team captain. We will allocate your teams now and set off in 10 minutes. After that, they all divided into teams. The distribution was completely based on chance, there were no observable patterns. Niu Heng, Zhang Lai, and Xiao Chen were all coincidentally placed on the same team. There were 6 other core disciples they did not know. Their team captain was the only female disciple in the top 10, Yun Kashin. She wore white, and there was an extremely calm expression on her delicate face. There was a slender saber hung from her waist as she walked leisurely over to them. When Yun Kashin saw them, she swept her eyes over all their faces. She said, "Call out your name and your cultivation. Report your strengths and the attribute of your martial spirit. We will start with you." Yun Kashin was pointing at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen thought for a while before saying, "Qingyan Peak, Yi Chen. Inferior grade martial saint. My strengths are my movement techniques and Lingyun saber technique. The attribute of my martial spirit is lightning." When Xiao Chen said his martial spirit's attribute was lightning, a strange look appeared in Yun Kexin's calm eyes. Her gaze lingered on Xiao Chen's face. Then the rest continued. Baikan Peak, Mu Heng. Peak inferior grade martial grade master. I specialize in defense. My martial spirit's attribute is wood. Tianyu Peak, Zhang Lai. Inferior grade martial saint. I do not have any special strengths. My martial spirit's attribute is wind. Qianduan Peak, Gao Shang. Medial grade martial saint. My specialty is offense. My martial spirit's attribute is fire. After all 9 of them introduced themselves, they all had a rough understanding of each other. Yun Kashin nodded slightly and pointed at Xiao Chen. From now on, you are this team's vice captain. Aside from myself, he has the most authority. Not only did Xiao Chen feel surprised, but the other 8 people also felt extremely shocked. This was especially so for Qianduan Peak's Gao Shang. His cultivation was the highest amongst the 10 people, even higher than the peak inferior grade martial saint Yun Kashin. Gao Shang was already unhappy that Yun Kashin was the team captain. However, she was one of the top 10 core disciples. Her strength spoke for itself, so he had no choice but to accept it. However, now he had to let someone who was an early inferior grade martial saint be the vice captain. Gao Shang could not bear it. Gao Shang snorted coldly and said, "He should be the vice captain based on what? Do you not understand that, in the realm of martial saints, even the difference of 1 grade is 100-fold difference in strength?